Hello. I need everyone to take a seat because today's episode is a little different. Usually, here on Shelf Esteem Issues, we gather in the shadow court to judge, morally question magic users, emotionally unavailable warlords, suspiciously attractive villains, and anyone who makes catastrophic decisions in a fantasy forest. But today, there are no dragons, no magical forests. No morally gray men threatening kingdoms. Just emotional devastation, wartime love letters, unresolved family trauma, and a romance novel that absolutely ambushed me in a dark alley and stole my emotional stability. Today, we're talking about The Things We Leave Unfinished by Rebecca Yarros, episode 10. And listen, I know what some of you are thinking. Robin, why are we reading romance now? Excellent question. I also asked myself that. Right before this book ruined my entire week. Welcome back to Shelf Esteem Issues, the podcast where we don't just read books, we investigate them like they committed emotional crimes. Plot, characters, life decisions. Nothing escapes the court. And today's defendant is a story about unfinished love stories, war, family secrets, and two writers forced to finish a novel neither of them wanted to touch. Which is already suspicious, right? Because if someone tells you a love story was left unfinished, you just know something devastating happened. And reader, it did. Spoiler alert, a light one. So here's the setup. Georgia Stanton's great-grandmother was a famous romance author, and when she dies, Georgia inherits her final manuscript. The problem? The book was never finished, which means a publisher decides the best solution is to pair Georgia with a best-selling romance author named Noah Harrison to finish it together. And if that sounds like a recipe for emotional chaos, you would be correct. Because not only do these two immediately clash, they also discover that the unfinished manuscript is actually based on a real love story. A love story from World War II. And suddenly, this isn't just a book about romance. It's a book about love, loss, war, family, sacrifice, and the things people leave behind when life doesn't go the way it was supposed to. Now, Shelflings, I need to make a confession. When I picked up this book, I thought, oh, cute. A little romance palette cleanser. It also was a book that my book club was reading. Shout out to Forget Me Not Fables. So that's also another reason why I picked it up. But I thought something light, something cozy, maybe a little flirting, maybe some witty banter, maybe a kiss. What I did not expect was to be sitting on my couch at 1 a.m. whispering, Rebecca Yarros, how dare you? Because this book weaponizes feelings. And normally on this podcast, we deal with murder forests, dangerous magic, villains who could ruin your life but look good doing it. But instead today, I'm emotionally invested in love letters from the 1940s, which feels illegal. This story unfolds in two timelines. And honestly, both of them hurt. Timeline 1, Georgia and Noah in the present day. Two writers who absolutely do not want to work together. They argue, they disagree, they challenge each other's interpretations of the manuscript, and slowly, they start realizing the story they're finishing might reveal the truth about Georgia's family history. which makes everything more complicated. Timeline 2, the manuscript itself. The love story between Scarlett and Jameson during World War II. And this timeline is where the emotional damage begins, because it's a love story unfolding during a war, and everyone knows what that means. Let's put it on the court. Let's put it on trial. You know what time it is. Even if this book is outside our usual genre, we still have to put it through the shadow court. It's always in session. And today, we're going to judge romantic decisions, emotional damage, questionable communication choices. Scarlett is bold. She's passionate. She's stubborn. She's a writer trying to carve out space for herself in a time period where women were expected to do literally anything else. And I respect that. But Scarlett also makes some decisions where I had to pause and say, are we okay? Because she loves fiercely. But sometimes love makes people choose the harder path when they don't need to. Her verdict, passionate, dramatic, emotionally brave, but also slightly chaotic. I can acknowledge her courage, though. Up next is Jameson. We need to talk. Because this man walks into the story with that classic energy of, I love you, but I also have responsibilities and secrets and emotional barriers. And immediately, I'm suspicious. The whole court is suspicious. Because, historically speaking, men with secrets in romance novels really make things easier. However, Jameson also shows up. He sacrifices, he loves deeply, and he carries the weight of the war in ways that make his character incredibly human. His verdict, emotionally complicated, but acquitted. Then we have our friend Noah Harrison, because when he first appears, I didn't trust him. Not even a little bit. He's arrogant, he's smug, and he clearly thinks he knows better than Georgia about the story she inherited, which is bold behavior for a man entering into a family from way back. But over time, we see layers, vulnerability, respect, growth, which is honestly one of my favorite character arcs. His verdict, initially suspicious, later redeemable. What makes this story powerful isn't just the romance. It's the idea that some stories don't end the way we want them to. Sometimes people don't get their perfect ending. Sometimes history interrupts. Sometimes life interrupts. And the people left behind have to figure out how to carry those stories forward, which is exactly what Georgia and Noah are doing. They're not just finishing a manuscript, they're uncovering a legacy. Now, let's discuss the real crime of this book, because Rebecca Yarros didn't just write a romance. She wrote a story that slowly reveals its emotional impact piece by piece. You think you know what's coming, you think you're prepared, and then suddenly, boom, the truth about Scarlett's story hits you, and it hits hard. This is the kind of book where you close the final page and just sit there for a moment, reflecting, processing, because the ending doesn't just tie up the story, it reframes everything. But this book is still done beautifully, because this book handles two timelines in a way that feels meaningful instead of confusing. Each storyline strengthens the other, and by the time everything comes together, you realize that the unfinished story was never just about romance. It was about legacy, memory, and the way love echoes across generations. So, is the things we leave unfinished worthy of the court? Absolutely. But not because it's dramatic or chaotic, because it's emotional. It reminds us that love stories aren't always neat. Sometimes they're unfinished and they're complicated. And sometimes someone else has to pick up the pen and finish the story. And that brings us to the end, Shelflings, a rare moment where we wandered outside the fantasy forest and accidentally found itself in a love story, which I did not expect. But honestly, I'm glad it happened. Because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't the ones with magic or monsters. Sometimes they're the ones about people and the things they leave behind. So remember, Shelflings, somewhere in your next book, someone is about to make a terrible decision. But don't worry, I'm going to talk about it. Join me next week when we review and judge a Frida McFadden novel. I'm not going to tell you which one. You'll have to tune in to find out. Bye-bye.